opinion because they are so contrary to what we're being told.
At least 25 Israelis dead. I don't know what the fuck.
Like headless chickens. That's clearly not the case, is it?
Absolutely, it's not the case because this operation shows a high level of preparation, of intelligence gathering, of execution, and knowing exactly when and where to hit. This is an indication that Hezbollah has regained the control, and it is completely the opposite of what Defense Minister Yoav Gallant was saying during this particular day, when he said that only 30% of Hezbollah's capability remained and that Hezbollah has been defeated. And Benjamin Netanyahu came out and while addressing the UNIFIL and United Nations Secretary General, he was also adding that Hezbollah has been crippled. So all that indicates the opposite.
And just to play the devil's advocate here, Elijah, a military analyst I was listening to a little earlier was saying that even though we talk about Israel's air defense system being one of the most sophisticated in the world, it is not 100%. It is well known that it can't stop absolutely everything. And he was saying that he's not surprised that what happened in this attack has not happened before. Things like this are inevitable given how many strikes they are from Hezbollah on Israel. What do you make of that statement?
I see today what happened is, as the guest was saying, there were rockets, and among these rockets were there also drones, which means that Hezbollah understand the way to flood the Israeli interception system and sneak in the real target to go toward a specific objective.
Muy fuerte. Hemos entrenado bien, hemos jugado bien y tenemos otro partido muy importante que tenemos que ganar. Tenemos una cosa más grande que hacer.
That shows the knowledge of Hezbollah, how to evade the Israeli.
And a swim in Timbuktu. I've seen unicorns in Burma and a Yeti in Nepal. And I've danced with 10-foot pygmies in a Montezuma hall. I've met the King of China and the working Yorkshire miner, but I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And it's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of arrogant bastards who hate black people.
I once got served in Woolies after less than 4 weeks' wait. I had lunch with Rowan Atkinson when he paid and wasn't late. I know a public swimming bath where they don't piss in the pool. I know a guy who got a job straight after leaving school. I met a normal Merman and a fairly modest German, but I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And that's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of talentless murderers who smell like baboons.
Okay.
I've had a close encounter of the 22nd kind. That's when an alien spaceship disappears up your behind. I've got directory inquiries after less than 40 rings. I've even heard a decent song by
surprising
the pool. I know a guy. I once got served in Woolies after less than 4 weeks' wait. I had lunch with Rowan Atkinson when he paid and wasn't late. I know a public swimming bath where they don't piss in the pool. I know a guy who got a job straight after leaving school. I met a normal Merman and a fairly modest German, but I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And that's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of talentless murderers who smell like baboons.
I've had a close encounter of the 22nd kind. That's when an alien spaceship disappears up your behind. I've got directory inquiries after less than 40 rings. I've even heard a decent song by Paul McCartney's Wings. I've seen a flying pig in a quite convincing wig, but I've never met a nice
South African.
No, he's never met a nice South African. And that's not bloody surprising, man, 'cause we're a bunch of ignorant love nuts with no sense of humour.
Loch-Ness Monster and he looks like Fred Astaire. At the BBC in London, he's the chief commissioner. I know a place in Glasgow which is bright with daffodillies. I met the man in Kathmandu who claimed to have 2 willies. I've had a nice pot noodle, but I've never had a poodle. And I've never met a nice South African.
No, he's never been a nice South
African.
And it's not bloody surprising then, because we've never met one either.
But I've never met a nice South African.
Tragic killings, far-right riots erupted across the UK.
We really were afraid we were going to die one way or another.
Online platforms weaponized disinformation and hatred.
Out-and-out lies, just all over social media. They were hoping to start a race war.
People in Power investigates the forces behind the unrest.
Accounts with huge followings had counted at least 27 million impressions of this disinformation.
Social media and the UK riots on Al Jazeera. How it's reported.
Look at actual information on the ground. Look at the way that this issue is framed in the media.
How it's used to justify.
De-escalation through escalation. Anything you hear that immediately that it's the same.
How it is weaponized.
Israel's online push has been aimed at the smartphone generation.
The first ever female-led operational tank unit.
What they are trying to sell right now is a full-blown genocide.
The Listening Post decodes the media on Al Jazeera.
A face can tell a story without uttering a single word. The unconventionality of life, witnessed through the lens of the human eye on Al Jazeera.
Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani International Anti-Corruption Excellence Award. Nominate your hero now.
You're watching Al Jazeera. Reminder for our top stories this hour. Israeli media are reporting that 3 people have been killed and at least 67 injured following a drone strike on the northern Israeli town of Binyamina. Israel's air defense systems failed to detect the drone, and the army says it's investigating why sirens were not activated. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for the attack. Let's turn now to a breach by the Israeli military that the UN's mission in Lebanon is calling a shocking violation. UNIFIL
Oh my
says
God,
that
it leaves
Israeli
tracks.
tanks destroyed the main gate of its position in the south and fired several rounds. It's the latest Israeli attack on peacekeepers in the region. On Thursday, 2 UN peacekeepers were injured when an Israeli tank fired on an observation tower in the mission's headquarters in Nakura. Israeli forces also hit other UN positions in the area. Well, that breach comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged the United Nations Secretary General to evacuate the UNIFIL peacekeeping force from combat areas in Lebanon. He warned that their presence in the area made them, in his words, hostages of Hezbollah.
I want to address the Secretary General of the United Nations directly. It's time to withdraw UNIFIL forces from Hezbollah strongholds and combat zones. The Israeli Defense Forces have requested this repeatedly and faced rejection repeatedly, a rejection entirely aimed at providing a human shield for Hezbollah terrorists. Your refusal to withdraw UNIFIL forces makes them hostages of Hezbollah. This also endangers them, as well as the lives of our soldiers.
Ray Murphy is a human rights lawyer and also served as a UN peacekeeper with UNIFIL. He says Israel's latest attack is reckless and unjustifiable.
It's a deliberate act, a violent act by Israeli Defense Forces. In no way can this be attributed to Hezbollah. It is a decision by Israeli forces to target UN positions, UN posts. It marks a serious escalation because it's only a matter of time before some UN personnel are seriously injured or killed if this continues. And it is not addressing the Secretary General and demanding that the UN forces withdraw. It is the Security Council on behalf of the United Nations and the international community that has approved and deployed this force. It's
So Rudder
a
left.
UN resolution, and in that regard, Israel and all other parties to this conflict are bound by that resolution, and any violation of that resolution is a violation of international law, and the acts of the Israeli Defense Forces in attacking UN posts constitute war crimes. The Israelis do not want to have an international force present in South Lebanon while they conduct their operations. They do not want to have a UN force that is able to report and observe the activities of the Israeli Defense Forces on the ground. The Israelis seem to be intent on carrying out a similar campaign in South Lebanon to that which they've just conducted and are continuing to conduct in Gaza, and they must not be allowed to do this.
Well, the Pentagon has confirmed that the Biden administration is planning to send a missile defense system to Israel to protect against any Iranian threats. And American troops will be deployed to operate the system known as THAAD. Well, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense requires 95 soldiers to operate. It is highly effective to shoot down short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles. It can hit targets as far as 200 kilometers away. It consists of 6 truck-mounted launchers, 48 interceptors, radio and radar equipment. The United States previously deployed a THAAD battery to Israel in 2019 for training and an integrated air defense exercise. Let's go to Tawhid Asadi. He's a writer and specialist in Iranian affairs. He joins us now live from Tehran. Tawhid, good to see you. What does it mean for Iran, for the US, to be offering such an obvious show of support for Israel?
Well, it seems that the United States has decided to continue its support from the Israeli regime, and Iran perceives it as if the United States is a sort of accomplice to all the obnoxious, hostile behaviors that Israelis are conducting against different players in the region, including the Islamic Republic of Iran. The early or the immediate reaction that we saw is that of the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who wrote in his X account that it's going to put the lives of the United States troops at risk. This is something very rare that we hear from the Iranian Foreign Minister, and it shows that indeed Iran is prepared for any sort of scenario. Of course, we know that the deployment means we will see some American troops on the ground to, let's say, use that anti-missile system, but added to that is more than 40,000 United States troops deployed in the West Asia, and that statement from the Iranian side should be taken into account very seriously. But on the other hand, we know that we see this statement coming from the Iranian foreign minister and other officials that if the country is ready for both peace and war, the favorite scenario from the Iranian side is indeed peace, and it's practicing diplomatic means by visiting different countries in the region by the foreign minister and other statements by Iranians showing that there is no interest in Tehran for full-fledged all-out war scenario, but when it comes to practice, indeed, we see the signals, warnings that Iran tries to send to the United States, to the Israelis, that in case the situation becomes further escalated, if tensions ramp up, there is a possibility of almost everything from the Iranian side. And the Iranian president came out a couple of days ago to talk about the Israeli defense, air defense system, saying that it's not Iron Dome, it's a fragile dome. So it seems that there are capabilities in Iran and among Iranian regional allies to come back to the Israelis with retaliation in case they defend to attack Iran or Iranian allies. And added to that is the confidence here in Iran that exists when it comes to the capabilities of groups like Hezbollah. Iranian Supreme Leader said that there is this full confidence on the structural strengths. All in all, the situation from the Iranian perspective is that Israelis, they've got this insatiable desire to expand the battlefield. So there should be preparedness for any sort of scenario.
All right, thank you for that. Tawhid Asadi speaking to us there from Tehran. Thank you. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are under siege in northern Gaza. There is little to no food or water. That's because Israeli forces have been preventing the entry of life-saving aid. Palestinians who tried to escape the area are being shot at by Israeli drones. At the same time, Israel is yet again targeting schools where displaced Palestinians have been sheltering. At least 2 people were killed, several others wounded in a strike on Al Fallujah school in Jabalia. The injured have been taken to Kamal Adwan Hospital, even though doctors there are trying to evacuate patients following demands from the Israeli army for people to leave or face being bombed.
What is happening is a process of attrition, a siege and artillery shelling. Tanks are present and the occupation forces are stationed at the walls of these schools. They are surrounding Shadi Abu Ghazala School, Al Fallujah School and Hafsa bint Omar Government School. The army is now at the rear walls of these schools. We hope the world intervenes to lift the siege on Jabalia camp, find solutions for the wounded and provide the necessary medical supplies to these injured people.
Hind Kadari reports now from Deir al-Balah.
The Israeli assault on Jabalia on the northern Gaza Strip continues for 9 days now. For more than 9 days, there has been constant Israeli airstrikes, Israeli artillery shelling, and also quadcopters everywhere. For 9 days now, Palestinians there do not have any food, any water, or any medicine. According to the ICRC and the PCRS, they're saying that they're receiving a lot of appeals from Palestinian citizens from those areas, asking them to secure their protection and also to give them free access and secure access to leave their houses to a safe place. But at the end of
My
the
gosh.
day, those teams were unable to reach those families because the Israeli forces are targeting anyone who's trying to rescue or help any other Palestinians. Now, as far as we know, that the telecommunications in the northern Gaza Strip is very weak. We lost connection with our colleagues there, but according to Palestinians, they say that even if they leave the area and even if they leave Jabalia, there's no guarantee that they're going to be safe, because Israel is also trying to empty the northern Gaza Strip. But after they mentioned and they announced the evacuation orders, Palestinians are still being targeted. So most of the families decided to stay in their houses because they believe it's also not safe to escape these Israeli airstrikes. Hind al-Khudari, Al Jazeera, Al-Aqsa Hospital, Gaza, Deir al-Balah.
Okay, that's it from me, Marlene Saeed. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after the listening post. Lots more news on our website. Do check it out.
Israel is Judaism and Judaism is Israel.
Many American Jews are raised with a one-sided view of Israel.
This is our land. That's what was conveyed to us.
Found in the depths of my family's house.
But the tide is shifting as younger Jewish Americans learn the reality about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians.
I was never in a Palestinian house till I barged into one in the middle of the night. It's a military occupation.
This has been a symbolic week, and the scenes of war have been savage. All of the north of Gaza is a closed military zone. Israel has said any Palestinians who remain will be considered agents of terror. Journalists are being picked off by the Israeli military. A press vest is no protection. It makes you a target. And Lebanon is under relentless fire. We speak with podcaster and professor Karim Makdisi on what Israel says its intentions are and what it is actually doing. A year of grief, collective trauma, and anger. Nothing has been the same since October the 7th, 2023. In Israel's mainstream media, a narrative of mourning sits alongside one of revenge. A year ago, 1,200 people were killed during the attack by Hamas. More than 200 captives were taken. 101 of them remain in Gaza, many of them presumed dead. In Israel, the language used by politicians and the media has been genocidal. The prevailing view is that nothing justifies October the 7th. There's no context or history to make sense of it. But October the 7th has justified everything since. The razing of Gaza, more than 42,000 people killed, countless bodies unaccounted for under rubble, and 90% of the population evicted from their homes. These atrocities have been almost entirely absent from Israeli media coverage. So too has any self-reflection for the complicit role that mainstream Israeli news outlets have played in this genocide, legitimizing, even cheerleading the extermination of Palestinians. A date branded into the history of a region and its people. The images from Israel and Gaza couldn't be more different, 1 year since the 7th of October, 2023. As Israel mourned those killed and captured in a Hamas attack it had been completely unprepared for, Gaza burned as the Israeli army launched a ferocious assault on the north of the Strip. On the Israeli airwaves, the commemorative coverage was like so much that has been seen over the past year.
E1. Rotate. Shit.
It's a year now that the leading 4 channels in Israel have been working on a wartime schedule. That's 24 hours a day, covering one side and one side only of the conflict. So they're covering in depth the Israeli perceptions and the Israeli trauma and giving very little coverage to the other side.
Israeli society was shocked to its core on October 7th. Not because of the scale and the intensity of the events alone, but also because on that day, many of the myths about Israel's invincibility have been shattered.
מהתחושה שמה שהיה ספציפית ב7 באוקטובר לא יכול להיות שזה יהיה בתוך מדינת ישראל.
And I think Israeli society has been grappling with this mainly through using its current mood as a mobilizing force for war, rather than asking big existential questions about how we got here.
For Palestinians, the violence that has been unleashed upon them in a war that has been conducted like almost no other has left them shredded. The message from Hamas's armed wing, marking a year since October the 7th, was a reiteration of the reasons for the attack on Israel.
وبعدما تغول العدو في الاستيطان والتهويد والعدوان على الأسرى وانتهاك كل المحرمات.
The fact that Hamas continues to exist, that despite the deep losses it has suffered through the war, its spokespeople still put out communications and its fighters still face off with Israeli soldiers. That reality has been galling for Israel.
For many months in the beginning of the war, Israel was kind of marketing this notion of complete and utter victory. But then nothing happened. I mean, Hamas is not beaten. The hostages are not back. We see further away than ever, and there's no deal in sight. So all the stated goals of the war are not being achieved. In recent months, there's been this new notion called the General's Plan. Basically, a bunch of ex-generals offering this notion of how we get out of the mess we've gotten into in Gaza.
The plan to starve
and cleanse Gaza was actually revealed very early on in the first week of October of 2023. In that document, it was clear that they said that they were going to make the Gaza Strip smaller in size and fewer in population.
בערך 300,000 התושבים שנשארו בצפון הרצועה. אנחנו מורים לכם לצאת מצפון הרצועה, אנחנו מסמנים לכם שני מסדרונות די בטוחים ליציאה.
And now with Giora Island coming forward with this same idea, same plan, it's just a copy-paste of the previous plan.
There is a symbolic element to the fact that those thousands of Palestinians remained in the north and have endured starvation, thirst, disease, isolation, and disconnection from their families. And I think this creates an element of defiance that 1 year into this genocide, you have this community that has endured and continues to endure.
בעוד שבוע נגמר הזמן הזה, השטח הוא שטח צבאי, מי שמחליט להישאר שם זה בעיה שלו.
Here you have instances where a former general casually talk about the need to starve and exterminate an entire population. It is deeply unsettling.
The ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza is underway. Last week, in the days leading up to October 7th, the Israeli army began bombing Jabalia refugee camp, already the site of repeated assaults. Coupled that with a ground invasion. Israel has airdropped leaflets and sent text messages ordering Palestinians to leave. Residents have reported indiscriminate firing by Israeli soldiers. There have also been more targeted attacks. Israeli forces have shot multiple journalists wearing vests clearly marked press. Alongside this drive to depopulate northern Gaza is a plan for, quote, de-radicalization, set out in a paper titled From a Murderous Regime to a Moderate Society, the Transformation and Reconstruction of Gaza after Hamas.
The plan for de-radicalization, which was written up by several academics, basically compares Gaza Strip with Nazi Germany after the war. So it's kind of a plan. First you occupy, you destroy the entire mechanism of command and control by Hamas, and then you form a military rule over Gaza, and through changing the entire system of education and promising Palestinians that one day, if they become de-radicalized, then they will eventually get some sort of an autonomous state. That would warrant clear and direct control by Israel over Palestinians in Gaza for a very, very long time.
Israel's television channels have not merely covered the violence of the past year, they have legitimized it.
אנחנו ב-7 באוקטובר, שנה אחרי הטבח, נכנסים לתאים של הנוח'בה, פעילות מניעה.
To mark the one-year anniversary of October the 7th, a reporter for Channel 13 embedded with forces led by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir as they terrorized Palestinian captives in a military prison. Not mentioned in the report was the fact that the vast majority of these inmates are locked up without a trial and subjected to torture. Israeli news outlets have served as vectors for some of the most dangerous and dark rhetoric. The language of genocide has come not only from politicians and pundits, but journalists themselves.
לדעתי, צה"ל היה יכול לתת מכת פתיחה כואבת יותר עם 100,000 הרוגים.
When Israel was dragged before the International Court of Justice by South Africa on the allegation of genocide, output from Israeli media served as evidence.
One of the issues that we saw that emerged from the ICJ hearing, and there was a specific call on the part of the court to stop incitement. We don't see that any of these commentators are being pushed back against by the journalists. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's that they are allowed to speak, that they're allowed to give their full statement, and there's nobody that's ever really challenging them or pushing them or saying to them that this is illegal or that this is wrong.
אנחנו בסוף מתעסקים עם מחבלים, שטן.
מסריחים, עם כפכפים, באים דוחים, באמת, אשכרה דוחים.
בהחלט, אני
אין
מסכים
שום
איתך.
דבר.
The media in Israel worked to give the victims of the 7th of October a voice 24 hours a day. And there was virtually no time given to the disaster that was occurring as a result of Israel's military action in Gaza. It's natural for a state to report more on its own victims, but responsible media needs to allow for both narratives to be shown.
To me, as a journalist, that seeing my colleagues in mainstream Israeli journalism has been just this constant veil of disappointment, even betrayal, to see how complicit the media has been in facilitating and fostering war crimes. I mean, we have Channel 14, which is kind of on the extreme right, where there have been dozens of explicit calls for genocide.
זה למחוק את עזה לגמרי, לא להשאיר שם בן אדם אחד, זה פשוט חיות אדם.
Even on Channel 12, you had people very freely discussing the question of for and against raping Palestinian prisoners.
זה מגיע להם, זו נקמה ראויה מאוד, רק חבל שלא עושים את זה בצורה ממוסדת.
Most Israeli journalists think that they're doing the patriotic thing by uplifting the troops and national morale by only focusing on ourselves. That's just not true. I mean, our role as journalists is to inform the public of the reality as it is happening. When the media isn't doing that and is focusing only on the experiences of Israelis, it's just betraying its responsibility.
Yeah, that's weird as fuck.
Israel's unprecedented targeting of journalists has been a horrific feature of its war on Gaza. It has made Gaza the most dangerous place in the world to be a journalist. This week was particularly brutal. Nick Muirhead has been following events.
As Israeli forces close in on the northern part of the Gaza Strip, the few journalists who remain there have once again found themselves in the crosshairs. Last Sunday, an Israeli artillery attack struck and killed 19-year-old journalist Hassan Hamad in his